Hi, my name is Rory Lee, and I want to start by apologizing for not being able to be physically present for today's panel, though I do hope this video and the content therein suffices in my absence. For my presentation, I'll be attending to the pedagogical portion of our project, and to that end, I'll provide some of the initial data that has emerged from the questions we asked about digital rhetoric that were geared towards teaching. I'll start by restating the 4 pedagogy-based questions that we posed, and then I'll share data from the responses pertaining to each question. Finally, to conclude, I'll offer some final words about each of those pedagogical areas. In terms of placement, the questions that inquired explicitly about teaching were ones 3 through 6, which were stated as follows. What are the outcomes for teaching with/in digital rhetoric, and how do you achieve those outcomes? If you had to pick one reading, book, essay, or scholar to assign your students in digital rhetoric, what would it be and why? What is your favorite assignment in digital rhetoric and why? And how, if at all, do you assess digital rhetoric in the classroom? Now, let's move to goals and outcomes. Here, I divided the data into 2 categories, knowing and doing. Though before delving into either, I should note that many interviewees mentioned that the goals and outcomes vary per course. In addition, when considering goals and outcomes, many think about not only the goals for the course, but also the way the course itself operates within a larger program, say a first-year composition program, an undergraduate major or minor, or a graduate program. When it comes to knowing digital rhetoric, 3 major goals emerged. The first is to have students understand what counts as the digital and how the digital informs and impacts the physical and the material. In short, the goal is to have students define the digital and unpack its relationship to the physical and that which predated it. The second goal is to have students understand how the digital informs rhetorical theories and methodologies. And here I've embedded related goals, such as having students see the digital as a means to respond to the rhetorical situation, having students understand the importance of and new potentials for reaching an audience, and having students understand the significance and variety of networks. And with the latter, networks were referenced in terms of technologies, as well as the networked communities those technologies can foster. The final goal in this set was to have students learn how to be a citizen in the digital realm. In many ways, this invokes classical notions of rhetoric, and it parallels our effort to teach spoken and written rhetoric to students so they can enter and participate successfully in the civic realm. When it comes to doing digital rhetoric, once again, 3 major goals emerged, one of which also had related subgoals. The most common goal overall, regardless of knowing or doing, was to have students produce digital and multimodal text. Some respondents even specified the type of text. For instance, Reader wanted students to create a text that contributes to a scholarly conversation, while others wanted students, through doing, to refine one's digital literacies. And here, there were other specificities offered. For instance, S.C. Beck mentioned Stuart Selber's framework for multiliteracies, Casey Boyle noted the importance of networking as a literacy, and Jeff Rice emphasized the importance of juxtaposition as a digital logic. The other commonly cited goal in relation to producing digital and multimedia text was to have students not only think critically about technology, but also make purposeful and informed choices when composing. For instance, they wanted students to consider the affordances and constraints of a given technology and to consider the available means of persuasion when producing digital and multimodal texts. A second goal, as voiced by Iman, was to have students engage in conversations about the digital. For instance, do non-humans have agency? And lastly, Yancey wanted to make sure students had the opportunity to play and could come to see doing as a form of play. When interviewees attempted to isolate one text to have students read in a course on digital rhetoric, only 6 texts were cited more than once. Those included Doug Iman's recently published Digital Rhetoric, Theory, Method, Practice, Colin Brooks' Lingua Fracta, Liz Losh's Virtual Politic, Jody Shipka's Towards a Composition Made Whole, and Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man. And lastly, the sixth wasn't a particular work, but a set of works, and those by Greg Ulmer. His work was mentioned multiple times. His book, Heuretics, The Logic of Invention, was mentioned specifically, as was Victor Vitanza and Craig Saper's edited collection, Electracy, Gregory L. Ulmer's Text Shop Experiments. When it came to sharing one's favorite assignment, there was even less consensus, as only 3 types of projects were mentioned more than once. Those included having students map a phenomenon, make a video, and add to Wikipedia, whether it was to create an article or add to an existing one. There were, however, an abundance of other fascinating projects, which included, but were certainly not limited to, asking students to make an argument with Plato, create a geocache, curate selfies, create an electronic portfolio, visualize a key concept or set of key concepts, remix, create persuasive games, remediate an argument throughout the semester, create memes, create a hypertext or work in a hypertext environment, engage with the community to make something better, make a video response to some sort of director or perhaps a film, develop an informational campaign, which could be seen as similar to a viral marketing campaign, and analyze online privacy policies. When it comes to assessing projects, 3 types of responses were most common. The first was to have our students articulate their process and, more importantly, to defend the choices they made during it. And here, the text can go by different names. For instance, some call it a rhetorical rationale, while others refer to it as a justification statement. Regardless of the name, such a text frequently includes some sort of reflection, as well as some form of self-assessment. In addition, many note that, while the final product is still important, the defense carries more weight, as that is where the learning tends to reside. Some mentioned a specific type of defense, for instance, a defense of audience, or a scholarly statement. The latter, as Reader noted, was an explanation of how the text engages with some sort of scholarship or scholarly conversation. The other common type of assessment involved designing a rubric, and those who mentioned the rubric offered some specific criteria. For instance, Liz Losh offered 4 criteria: conceptual, rhetorical, stylistic, and technical, while Aguayu mentioned 3: technical, conceptual, and storytelling. Lastly, the work of Cheryl Ball was mentioned multiple times, as many found her work to be rather generative. Now, to close, I'll share some final thoughts about each of the 4 aforementioned data points. First, prior to conducting our interviews at the Indiana Digital Rhetoric Symposium, we decided to title our project Ways of Knowing and Doing in Digital Rhetoric. And after sifting through and coding some of the initial data pertaining to pedagogical goals and outcomes, that title seems even more apropos. Those doing work in digital rhetoric want their students to know and understand certain things, but perhaps more importantly, they want them to do certain things, namely, create digital texts and do so with the knowledge they gain from the course. Or said another way, there's a strong connection between theory and practice, and thus a strong focus on praxis. As for scholarly works, a set of 6 texts received the most attention, but there were a surfeit of other texts that were cited, many of which were not only in print, or in other words, they weren't digital, or at least they included some discussions about print, but were also from outside the subfield of digital rhetoric and the larger field of rhetoric and composition. In addition, and as was evident during the slide on favorite projects, students are asked to produce a myriad of different texts, which speaks to the potential of new digital technologies to create diverse texts, as well as develop new genres, remediate old ones, and expand upon existing ones. What's also exciting and implied in the brief descriptions is the capability to target and reach audiences outside of the teacher specifically and the academy generally, thus making the rhetorical situations students are working in appear and feel more authentic and purposeful. Lastly, while assessment continues to be an area of struggle and consternation for many, 2 forms of assessment prove to be rather common. 1, some sort of defense of process and choices, and 2, some sort of rubric. However, my hedging there, through the use of some sort of, is a tacit acknowledgement that those defenses and those rubrics look much different from one teacher to the next and per assignment. Nonetheless, the data thus far indicate that, while we are still in the midst of defining the contours for the subfield of digital rhetoric, we have a rich and robust body of pedagogical knowledge and content to implement into the classroom, to share with our fellow colleagues, and to build upon as we move forward. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry once again for not being there in person. However, if you have any questions and or want to contact me further, you can reach me at my email address, which is ralee2@bsu.edu. Thank you.